Go. How's it go?
That's Patriot Front. They are they've been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They have not been designated as a domestic terrorist group by the United States government. I'm not aware that they've committed any acts of domestic terrorism. They just show up places and do their little marches and things like that. They did have some trouble a couple of years ago I think it was up in the Pacific Northwest. Some fists were thrown. They marched yesterday or today, sometime this weekend. They marched in Kansas City, Missouri. That footage is from their march in Kansas City, Missouri. And I've seen a lot of people on the left. You guys aren't going to like this one. I've seen a lot of people on the left basically saying, why weren't they arrested? You know, these guys marched and nobody was arrested. If all they're doing is marching, they have a constitutional right to do that under the First Amendment. And unless they are inciting imminent violence or committing some other crime. From what I understand of these guys, they just march. Obviously it's very upsetting knowing what they stand for. But we do have a First Amendment. They have a constitutionally guaranteed right to show up and march. As long as they're complying with, local ordinances and whatever, things like that. Remember, it must have been back in the late 60s, early 70s. Anybody who's gone to law school learns about this case in their first year of law school. Skokie, Illinois, white supremacist Nazis, the Klan, decided they wanted to march in that town. And they chose that town, Skokie, Illinois, for a very important reason. Skokie, Illinois had a huge population of Holocaust survivors. And the town denied them their permit. They sued the town, and they were represented by a Jewish lawyer who was working for the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Civil liberties is the Bill of Rights. And that attorney represented these people who, I'm sure to him personally, their views were absolutely despicable. But they had a constitutional right to march. And he was standing up for that principle. And he won, and they got to march. Now, were they well received in that town? No, they were not well received in that town. Because there's the law, there's the Constitution, but, just because you have a constitutional right to say something, the government cannot prevent you from saying certain things, does not mean that there won't be any societal or social consequences to some of the things that you say. And we saw a perfect example of that a few days ago. I can't remember exactly where it was. It was somewhere in the South. Some big dumb white guy walked into a black nightclub and started yelling the N-word loudly and repeatedly for some reason. Does he have a constitutional right to do that? Yes, he does. The patrons of that club inflicted the social or societal consequences on him in quite brutal fashion that I think required a trip to the hospital for him afterwards. But, which is illegal. It was fun to watch, but that's illegal. That's breaking the law. And so, it's like, for folks on the left, it's like, yeah, these guys are fucking scumbags, man. But if they're breaking no other law and they're just showing up and marching, they have a constitutionally guaranteed right to do that under the First Amendment. And calling for them to be arrested for doing that is not awesome. It's not a great take, put it that way. It's a bad take. We can disagree with them all we want. And I saw a TikTok from another creator this morning who had like some kind of behind the scenes footage of them like pulling their masks off afterwards. And a couple of the guys, their mask that they was wearing was actually men's underwear. Not kidding. They're pulling it off and it was men's underwear that they had on their heads. And, they should be roundly ridiculed for that as well. But it's like, you either believe in the Bill of Rights or you don't. And sometimes believing in the First Amendment means believing in the right of people to say things that you don't like, because that's the law. And that's what we're supposed to be, a nation of laws. That has backslid a bit recently, but that's how things are supposed to be. So don't call for people to be arrested simply because they say something that you don't like. It's a bad look.